Corey Heim could very likely be full-time in the Cup Series with 2011 racing in 2027, and could 2027 be the last year for Denny Hamlin in the Cup Series before he retires? What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and motorsports story discussed today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just share those really quickly. We're going to start by talking about Toyota, as it was reported by Matt Weaver earlier tonight that Toyota is the first OEM to win 5 of the first 6 NASCAR Cup Series races since 2007. In 2007, Chevrolet won 5 of the first 6 races during that year. Toyota's been off to an incredible start in 2026. Of course, Reddick has picked up 4 of those 5 victories, and Denny Hamlin is the other driver who's picked up a win for Toyota so far this year. Toyota, again, their domination's been incredible, and it's been fun to watch because, again, we haven't seen the manufacturer dominate like this start of the year in quite some time, especially in the era of parity, where parity is a big factor at contender. It's honestly incredible to see what Toyota's been doing to start the 2026 year, and I think they're going to win a lot more races. Not sure if that domination will continue tomorrow until this upcoming week, but Toyota's off to a really strong start in 2026. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Corey Heim. As was reported by the NASCAR Insights account on Friday after the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race, that Corey Heim has led 28 straight NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series races. He is now tied with Kyle Busch for the most straight races all-time led in a row in NASCAR truck competition. To be in the same statistical category as Kyle Busch, that is honestly incredible. Corey Heim's domination has been fun to watch. He won the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race at Darlington as well. And Corey Heim could potentially race Rockingham, and I think he'll lead laps there. He will likely break the record, as Corey's been dominant in Truck Series for the last couple of years. He's also tied, I believe, for 5th all-time on the wins list, so that's a big deal for Corey Heim. His domination continues. It's been impressive to watch. Congrats to Corey Heim on a really strong and great start in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series career and winning races as well. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're unfortunately taking this episode to a sour note, as it was sadly announced during the Sebring 12 hours on Saturday that Jim Michaelian has sadly passed away, I believe, in his mid-80s. Jim Michaelian, for those who don't know, was the founder of the Long Beach Grand Prix, one of the most iconic races over the course of the last 50 years. Being a founder of it with more individuals like Jerry Forsythe, who's been, of course, helping run that for a long time. But it's a sad day for motorsports across the board. Again, the Long Beach Grand Prix, like I mentioned, is one of the most iconic things, and he's been involved in motorsports for many years. My thoughts and prayers go out to the Michaelian family during this time. A sad day for motorsports, and a really sad day across the board to hear that Jim Michaelian has passed away, an icon to motorsports. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Tony Stewart Racing. Now, late Thursday going into Friday, Tony Stewart Racing was able to win their first high-limit racing race this past week at Central Arizona. The driver picked up the win was Rico Abreu. Now, this is not the first time Rico Abreu's won in the High Limit Series. He's won quite a few races the High Limit Series over the years. But, of course, the first time we've seen Tony Stewart racing in the series. And I think it's a really huge and awesome deal to see Tony Stewart Racing pick up the win and go to victory lane. Tony Stewart Racing's won a lot of different things. Of course, won in the World of Outlaws. To, of course, Tony Stewart's big part helping out with the NHRA. They've been winning a lot of races over there. Of course, Tony Stewart's had a lot of success as an owner in NASCAR for many, many years. Of course, raced recently in this series. Nonetheless, I think it's a big deal to see Tony Stewart Racing go out there and pick up the win. And for Rico Abreu to get it done, congratulations to him on picking up the win and picking up the victory and getting it done in the high limit race a couple days ago. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Darlington. Now, we've got some statistics to talk about from Darlington Raceway for the NASCAR Cup Series race this past weekend. As it was reported by the NASCAR Insights account after the Cup Series race concluded that Reddick has won 4 of the first 6 NASCAR Cup Series events. This is only, I believe, the 3rd time in NASCAR history in the modern era that we've seen this happen. Dale Earnhardt did it in 1987, where he won 4 of the first 6 events, and Bill Elliott also did it in 1992, where he actually won 4 in a row, winning races, I believe, at Atlanta, also winning at Richmond, also winning at Rockingham, and winning also at another track like Bristol as well. And on top of that, according to the NASCAR Insights account, the drivers who've been starting on the front row have won 17 of the last 25 NASCAR Cup Series races. This includes Tyler Reddick, This will also include Shane Van Gisbergen. This includes other big names that have been going to victory lane, like Ryan Blaney. Also, it's just been impressive to see what's been happening at all these types of tracks. And honestly, Darlington, we saw some interesting stuff. We'll talk about the race in a little bit. We're going back to Reddick. To be in the same category as people like Dale Earnhardt and Bill Elliott, I think that's honestly a very impressive and a really huge accomplishment for him. Congratulations to Reddick on picking up the win in the Cup Series event. And again, it's a huge win for him and a huge deal to see him go out there and get his 4th win of the season. I think this won't be the last time we're going to see him go to victory lane in the NASCAR Cup Series at this point this year. He could have double-digit wins for all we know because he's been showing a lot of speed this season. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jonathan Wheatley. As it was announced on Friday morning going into afternoon that Jonathan Wheatley has left the Audi F1 team effective immediately. Matteo Bonetta will be taken over as the team principal, the higher up at the Audi F1 team going into the upcoming week. There's been a lot of rumors circulating around what Jonathan Wheatley could be doing. There's been a lot of talk he could be headed over to Aston Martin, potentially replacing Adrian Newey, who it sounds like is no longer going to be the team principal for the Aston Martin team going forward, but he still will be the Aston Martin team. Now, Lawrence Stroll, the owner of the team, has denied the rumors over the course of the last couple weeks, but even with this departation, I think it makes a lot of sense. A lot of the former Red Bull people seem like they're coming back together, so it seems like the direction things are going, Jonathan Wheatley more than likely will end up going over to the Aston Martin team. Again, nothing's been confirmed from the team on that front, but I guarantee you that's the direction they're going with at this point because it would make a lot of sense, right? You want to go to Aston Martin, become the team principal, try to make that team stronger. We'll see what happens there, but it sounds like we might be seeing Jonathan Wheatley going to Aston Martin in 2026 to finish up the year and season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about the Sebring 12 Hours. Now, while the NASCAR Rally Auto Parts Series race is going on at Darlington Raceway, you have the Sebring 12 Hours going on. And the Porsches would absolutely dominate the race, and the Porsche Penskes would end up going to victory lane. It really would be a race between the 6 Porsche Penske car and the 7 Porsche Penske car. And it would be the number 7 Porsche Penske car that would end up going to victory lane. Now, he had some frustration, multiple drivers on the team. Kevin Estre, who I believe drives the number 6 for them, felt like they were not following the team orders at that point in the race, even though I think you should be inherently racing and going for the win. We shouldn't be having team orders in motorsports, but there's neither here nor there at this point. But Penske and Porsche, they're just absolutely dominating currently at the moment when it comes to the regulations in IMSA, and their domination in series honestly may need to be looked at, but at the same token, same time, I just think when you look at the start they've had this year, of course, they run the Daytona 24 hours, no shock and surprise there. Maybe you got to look at the BOP at this point to try to make the racing better. The racing actually was pretty good in my opinion, but I think there's things that certainly can be done, but nonetheless for Porsche Penske, it's interesting to see him win once again. Congratulations to them on picking up the win and picking up the victory and going to victory lane with the Porsche Penskes. A massive deal to see them get it done. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Matt Weaver. Now, many of you probably were on social media over the course of the last couple days, but there was some drama going around fellow journalists in NASCAR and short track scene as well, Matt Weaver. Apparently, Matt Weaver got banned by South Alabama Speedway during the weekend of the Rattler 250. And the reason he got banned from South Alabama Speedway was because of the fact that he apparently called out some AI propaganda or AI stuff when it came to some sort of contest that was going on, and instead of choosing someone who worked really hard on it, they chose some sort of AI thing. Matt Weaver was justifiably not very happy about that and called it out, and the track decided to go ahead and say, hey, let's ban him for no particular reason. Now, it is worth noting that South Alabama Speedway, multiple people from there have actually gone in and contacted Matt about this, and I think the big reason for this, basically why they're trying to talk to him and resolve this issue, is because there was a lot of backlash thrown South Alabama Speedway's way. They were getting a lot of crap, and I think it was justifiably so. Look, you don't have to agree with everything every journalist says, and I'm not speaking for Matt Weaver, but Matt Weaver is an absolute journalist. He's one of the top journalists when it comes to this, and he's one of my sources that I use when it comes to my content. So I think it's disappointing, especially when it comes to short track coverage, which Matt Weaver, by the way, is the best in the short track game at this particular point. It is honestly ludicrous and really uncalled for a track to ban a guy like him. Now, I'm glad to hear they've kind of resolved the issue. It seems like hopefully they have, because in my opinion, it's totally outrageous and uncalled for to ban a guy because you don't agree with the way he was calling out your track for doing things the wrong way. I think it's good to see that maybe they resolve the issue, but we all support Matt Weaver here. Matt Weaver's a good dude, a good individual, works his butt off. One of the best, in my opinion, the best when it comes to covering short tracks, and I really hope we see him in many tracks going forward, and I really hope we stop seeing the guy banned. It's not the first time he's been banned for a track, and I don't agree with him getting banned. So I thought it was uncalled for on their front, in my opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Max Verstappen. Now, if you watch NLS race that took place over the weekend while the Sebring 12 hours is going on, Max Verstappen was competing in the NLS event. Now, Max Verstappen and his team with fellow drivers Daniel Hucadella, Lucas Auert, and a couple other individuals as well, Jules Goulet. They actually technically were the winners of the race in Nürburgring, but unfortunately, a couple hours after the race concluded, they were disqualified from the race at Nürburgring. Now, the reason they got disqualified from the event because he had too many sets of tires going on the car. Throughout the weekend, the teams apparently are allowed only 6 sets of tires. Apparently, the organization missed that mark, and they had 7 sets of tires that were used throughout the weekend instead of 6. I feel bad for Max Verstappen in this situation because to me, I don't know how you can blame Max Verstappen for this. He isn't the one that controls what tires go on the car. And I feel like Max Verstappen kind of got robbed here. I feel like this being the reason they got disqualified, I really can't understand that, to be honest. I think it's a terrible look on some of the regulation stuff. I think some people are going to be calling it some BS stuff, which I don't completely blame them because I think Max Verstappen absolutely without question deserved this win. And to lose it this way is definitely disappointing for sure. And I can understand why there's a lot of Max Verstappen fans that were not very happy about this because to me, I think he absolutely deserved the win. To not win the race is very unfortunate, not because he didn't cross the finish line first, but because of the fact that basically there's some regulations in there that he really has no control over at this point. He's just there as a guest to race. Nonetheless, disappointing stuff overall for Max Verstappen not getting the win. I can't blame the team for being frustrated. They took responsibility for what the team did, but Max Verstappen doesn't deserve to have to basically take accountability because he's not the one that was doing the regulations on the car at that point when it came to the tires. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Japan. As it was reported by Adam Stern late Thursday night going into Friday morning that apparently multiple people from Japan, including the Prime Minister of Japan, have had discussed the IndyCar series over there in Japan, seeming like there could be potential leaning toward a return of IndyCar at Japan in the near and not so distant future. Now, IndyCar and Japan do have a very rich history. A lot of drivers have come from Japan who have had a ton of success, most notably Takuma Sato, who has won 2 Indianapolis 500s and multiple IndyCar races over the years. But they've also raced in Japan for many years as well. They have raced most notably, I believe they've almost raced Suzuka at one point, but they also have raced at a track known as Trainwing Motegi, which NASCAR did some exhibition race at the track many years ago, and also is notably known for Danica Patrick picking up her first and only IndyCar win in her career. I would absolutely love to see IndyCar go back to Japan, whether they can find a way to get Trainwing Motegi fixed up at this point, because that, unfortunately, I think they got hit by an earthquake many years ago that destroyed the track, sadly. I would absolutely love to see Japan get a race back in the future on the IndyCar circuit. We've talked about international expansion. I know they talk about going to Mexico, but I think if you wanted to have an international expansion, because there are a lot of people from Japan who do watch IndyCar at this point, and I think a lot of people are very supportive of drivers from that series. I mean, there's multiple people, like Kiku Oda, I believe, is basically interested in coming into IndyCar at this point. And I think it'd be really awesome because when you have a driver from Japan come into IndyCar, the country of Japan is very supportive of those drivers. They're very supportive of the people that are racing in the series. So I really love to see IndyCar go back to Japan in the future. I really hope it happens. I think it'd be huge for the sport. And I think it's something that does need to happen overall because I think it could be a huge win for the sport if that's something like that could happen, in my opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Tim Goulet. As it was reported by Declan Wayman a couple days ago and other reporters like Mark Crystal from FrontStretch.com that apparently Tim Goulet has been suspended by ARCA effective immediately, and not just for a little bit, but he's been indefinitely suspended. Now, why has Tim Goulet been suspended? According to reports, he apparently had an outstanding warrant that he was not following at the time, and if you have a warrant at all, you basically get not allowed to run, and that's something that is suspendable by the organization over there. Tim Goulet is a name that many of you are probably going to be familiar with. His wife, or former wife, I should say, if I'm not mistaken, I've heard rumors they're both filing for divorce currently at the moment. Apparently, Rita Goulet has made some accusations against him. Not going to explain those accusations here, but apparently things have been going on, and that's why Tim Goulet has been suspended. This is not the only suspension going on, of course. Obviously, Daniel Dye has been suspended indefinitely by NASCAR currently at the moment. Unknown when Daniel Dye will be clear. We'll talk about that in a little bit with the colleague stuff in the future. But I think when it comes to Tim, it doesn't surprise me. It seems like there's always some drama around like some of those cars, like the Rise organization, a team that Bobby Dale Earnhardt is supposed to be competing full-time. Not sure how that's going to get affected with Tim being not allowed to basically be involved in the sport currently at the moment. I guess because there are things that certainly can be affected at this point. I think it's a big news nonetheless for ARCA. Kind of crazy, we got multiple suspensions going on, but it doesn't surprise me. The person that is getting suspended at this point, when it comes to stuff like this, not shocked and surprised by it at the slightest. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Parker Retzlaff. Now, if you watch the NASCAR Rally Auto Parts Series race at Darlington Raceway, you saw a very impressive run from Viking Motorsports, but most notably by Parker Retzlaff, the driver of the number 99. Parker had a really strong run in this race, ran top 10 the whole entire event, and was at points one of the fastest cars, if not the fastest car on the racetrack. Did unfortunately not score top 10, but he finished inside the top 10, or top 5, I should say, but he still finished inside the top 10 and scored a really, really strong finish inside the top 10 of the race. And there's a lot of people in the industry that are very, very high on Parker Retzlaff. I am one of those included. I truly do believe that Parker Retzlaff deserves a full-time opportunity in a top-level organization. We have seen what he can do in top-level equipment or mid-pack equipment, right, with teams like Jordan Anderson Racing, teams like RSS Racing. He's had impressive qualifying runs, and he's had some really outstanding runs. I mean, it's not just this run at Darlington either. Look what he did at Atlanta, finishing in second position, and he's finished in the top 15 in all but one race so far in 2026, and the reason he didn't get a top 15 at Coda, if I'm not mistaken, that's the race where he didn't finish the top 15, was because he had a mechanical gremlin and failure in the race. I believe that if you give Parker Retzlaff an opportunity, he will do good. Now, what opportunities are out there? That's going to be the question, because you're going to need funding and sponsorship if you want to get a really strong and really great opportunity. But I think there's some teams you have to look at. There's been rumors of RCR over the years of Parker. I've heard rumors over the years that they have been interested in Parker. I know there's a little bit of a debacle that happened at the end of last year. There was a lot of talk in truck competition about him going over to Spire Motorsports throughout the offseason. I heard some outside rumors about that about a year or so ago. I think you're a big team like Junior Motorsports or RCR, or even in trucks like Spire. Take an opportunity on this guy. He will do very well for you. He won't destroy your equipment. He'll outperform it and do a fantastic and really, really good job. And I think there are teams that are taking notice of this. I mean, Brad Keselowski's a prime example. Hey, RFK Racing, you open up your Auto Parts Series team again and get Parker behind the wheel, because he is going to outperform his equipment and do a really good job. So we'll see what happens if Parker gets that chance and opportunity. I certainly think he does. He's really talented, very good, always outperforms his stuff, does a really good job behind the wheel. It would be incredibly disappointing and would suck to see him not get the chance and opportunity because of certain reasons out of his control with sponsorship. I think he deserves a full-time ride with a great team and organization, in my opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Busch. Now, Kyle Busch currently has 63 career NASCAR Cup Series wins. But there's a driver that is closing in very quickly at the moment on Kyle Busch's number, and that, of course, is Denny Hamlin, who last week or about 2 weeks ago at Las Vegas Motor Speedway picked up his 61st career NASCAR Cup Series win. Denny Hamlin's only 2 away from tying Kyle Busch and surpassing Kyle Busch with 3 more wins at this point. And Kyle Busch was asked a question about Denny Hamlin catching him. He says, "Are you worried and concerned about Denny Hamlin getting past you?" Well, Kyle Busch basically says he is not concerned about Denny Hamlin going out there and beating him. He says at his all-time goal, and he thought he would probably get the 70 or 75 career Cup Series wins, but he's pretty much saw that at this point with the team he's running with currently at the moment, and he's not even sure if he can get even 1 or 2 more wins at this point in NASCAR at the time. I think Kyle Busch knows at this point that Denny Hamlin is performing at a much better level. I mean, Denny Hamlin, yes, he hasn't won a championship like Kyle Busch has, but Denny Hamlin is one of the best drivers we've seen. Right now, you can argue he is the greatest driver at this time to not win a NASCAR Cup Series title and championship. But when I look at Kyle Busch, it's very evident that he's a guy who can win races. Kyle Busch has not lost a talent or lost a drive. I think the big thing that needs to happen for Kyle Busch at this point, he needs to go to a better team and a better organization. I think you look at the silly season market. Spire Motorsports will give him a better opportunity. And hey, depending on what happens to the 48, which we're not going to speculate at this point, but depending on what happens, he could be a candidate for the 48. But I think for Kyle Busch, I just think the big thing is getting this program to be better, and this program certainly to be stronger, and I really hope they can figure out what's going on over at RCR and make their program better, because if they don't figure it out, he will likely not be back with his team in the near and not so distant future, because right now the program just is not doing very, very well, and RCR just is not a good organization as a whole currently at the moment right now, and that's the reason Kyle Busch hasn't won a Cup Series race at this time. He can win truck races with Spire, but can't win a race in Cup because the program at RCR and ECR is just not good at the moment. So things need to get better for Kyle Busch to have a chance and opportunity. I really hope they do get better, because in my opinion, I think Kyle Busch is talented. He just needs the opportunity and needs equipment to be better for him going forward, in my opinion. That's the only way he will ever get a win in the future. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Kaden Honeycutt. Now, Kaden Honeycutt dominated the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race at Darlington, led about 70 or 75 laps of the race, I'm pretty sure more than that. But Kaden Honeycutt did unfortunately end up losing the race. And basically after the race concluded, he was really frustrated with the Cup Series drivers and how they raced against him. Most notably, Carson Hocevar drove the 77 truck for Spire Motorsports on Friday night, and Ross Chastain, who drove the 45 truck for Nice Motorsports, and was not very happy with the way those guys raced him in the event, and was definitely upset about the way they were racing him in the event, especially with them not being full-time drivers, is what he said. He wasn't very happy about it. Kaden Honeycutt talking about is something that's been talked about. There's obviously a lot of people who don't feel like Cup Series drivers should be racing in the lower series like the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series and the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series at this point. Or if they do race in this series, they should be racing with a lot more respect out there and not causing issues and problems. To me, when it comes to Cup Series drivers racing, I really don't have a major issue with the limitations. I feel like the Truck Series is almost honestly fine. 10 is not, yes, it's a lot of races, but actually 8 or 10 at this point. It's not insane in my opinion. I think 10, if they go higher than that, that's going to be overkill at this point. But I get it for Kaden Honeycutt. He felt like he was going to win a race, but the job of Ross Chastain and Carson Hocevar is not to lay over for these guys. The job is to go out there and win. That's what the teams paid them for. I mean, these guys, a lot of them, have to bring their own sponsorship and funding with them so they can race in these lower series. So while I do understand the frustration with Kaden Honeycutt, and I truly understand it, the goal of the drivers racing is to go out there and pick up wins. Their goal is to not lay over for you so you can just basically be happy with it. That's the thing. But I get the frustration from Kaden. I get it. I respect it. And honestly, don't have an issue with the frustration. I just don't entirely agree with some of the things said there. Caden's going to win races this year. I get the frustration. He wanted to win the race. But at the same token, same time, some of these Cup guys coming down, they're trying to run and win races. That's what the goal is, especially with the sponsorship dollars that are coming in at this point. Though it would be cool to see some of these Cup Series drivers run with lesser teams like Nice. Nice is not the top organization. That's why I respect Ross when he runs for small organizations like DGM and races for teams like Nice at this point. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Ben Rhodes versus Tyler Ankrum. Now, if you watch a NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race at Darlington Raceway, you saw the feud between Ben Rhodes and Tyler Ankrum during the race. Well, mainly it was Ben Rhodes who was mad at Tyler Ankrum. On about the third or fourth lap of the race, Ben Rhodes has had a really strong start to the year, where I believe came in second in the standings. Unfortunately, had a flat tire coming off of turn number 4 and hit the outside wall going down the front straightaway into turn number 1. And Ben Rhodes basically explained what happened, because Fox didn't do the best job when it came to explaining what happened in the incident and wreck. According to him, Tyler Ankrum tried to clear himself in front of Ben Rhodes and forced Ben up in the outside wall, getting a ton of damage on his truck. Then that's what caused Ben to hit the outside wall, because the truck at that point was completely destroyed. Now, obviously, Ben Rhodes was very, very frustrated. I can understand why he was mad at that time. Ben Rhodes basically getting a lot of damage on the truck, having a great start to the year, losing it like that can definitely be frustrating. But he took it pretty far. He went on social media and basically was calling out Tyler Ankrum throughout the night. He basically called him the upside-down face kid. Can't remember what show that individual's from, but he basically hit the outside wall and was calling him that at that point. Now, as in regards to Tyler Ankrum's side of the things, he took accountability and responsibility. He said, that is definitely 100% my fault, and I take responsibility for it. So obviously it seems like Ben Rhodes is more frustrated about it than Tyler Ankrum was. And Tyler Ankrum in the past has kind of called out drivers for basically the way they've raced him in the past, and I can understand that as well. To me, I think that Tyler Ankrum was clearly at fault for the wreck. I feel like Ben Rhodes could have held back a little bit in that situation, and it's kind of funny though. It's one of the best tweets I think we've seen from a driver up this point, and I think I can kind of understand the frustration to an extent from Ben because he wants to win a race. He's been closer to winning race this year than he's been the last couple years. His last truck win, I believe, came in 2023 at Charlotte, so it's been over 3 years since he last got a win in trucks at this point. So he wants to win and go to victory, and he thought he had a good enough truck to contend for the win. I think that's the main reason why he was upset and certainly frustrated in that situation. So I get at this point, I get the frustration, and I thought the tweet itself was funny. Will we see this feud continue between both these guys? I'm not sure at this point. It may not, who knows? Nonetheless, certainly understand why Ben's frustrated. Kind of funny tweet so that happened after the situation right there in the race at Darlington. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Riley Herbst and Connor Zilisch. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Cup Series race on Sunday, you saw the incident between Riley Herbst and Connor Zilisch. On one of the late race runs, with around 90-95 laps to go, Riley Herbst is actually having a pretty good run and running inside the top 20. Unfortunately, Connor Zilisch was also starting to move toward the front around 20th at that point, will get in the back of Riley Herbst and turn him into the inside wall. Riley Herbst's car after that was never the same, and he was very frustrated on the radio. Now, the team tried to communicate with him that Connor Zilisch took responsibility for the incident and says he misjudged it in that corner. And Riley Herbst seemed to be having none of it at that point that he got wrecked by Connor Zilisch. Meanwhile, the same thing was said on Connor's radio, where basically Connor admitted fault and responsibility. He felt like that Riley was kind of holding him up a little bit, kind of coming up the track, and he was committed at that point and ran into the back of him. Obviously, looking at this incident real quick, I understand why Riley Herbst is frustrated. He's having objectively one of his best Cup Series runs he's ever had at this point. And you keep hearing the rumors and rumblings that are happening behind the scenes. You hear that he might not be back at 2011 Racing in 2026 and could be going to Legacy Motor Club. He wants to perform very well, especially since the fact the guy who just won the Truck Series race is likely his replacement for next year. So he wants to do a really good job, and he had been having a really good run in the race. But they lost handling on that car, and they were likely going to be either the highest finishing or second finishing 2012 racing driver had Tyler Reddick not been able to fix his issues in a race with Bubba Wallace having his issues. But as for Connor Zilisch, he made a rookie mistake in that situation, and rookies are going to make mistakes. Darlington is one of the toughest tracks to run in the NASCAR Cup Series, and Connor should be given the leniency and opportunity to do really well. Plus, Connor's had a frustrating year in his own right. This is one of the best runs he's had in Cup up to this point. And it's only his second top 20. I mean, Trackhouse seems to be a little bit off. I will say they were not completely awful this weekend. SVG got a top 15. Ross Chastain also finished 16. But then, of course, you had Connor who finished in 18 position. So the team still got some work to do. But they certainly were better than where they were at Las Vegas. But they still have a lot of work to do. To me, I understand Riley's frustration, but at least Connor took responsibility. Connor's one of those guys that doesn't hold back. He'll take responsibility if he makes a mistake. He certainly did, but I think he admitted it. He knows his fault, and I respect Connor for taking accountability for the wreck because he knows he was at fault for the wreck in that situation, and I think he was right about taking responsibility for it. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the package from the NASCAR Cup Series race at Darlington. Now, this was the first time we have seen 750 horsepower Darlington Raceway since the race of 2021. Of course, when NASCAR went to the next-gen car in 2022, they lowered the horsepower from 750 to 670. And obviously, there's been a lot of people that are really excited and interested on how this race is going to go. Multiple notable Ford drivers had some comments on it. Among those is Brad Keselowski. He said it was definitely a lot more harder in the race. He definitely also said that there was a little bit easier to pass in a race than normal, and you could pass a little bit easier than you've been able to do in the next-gen car at this point. Ryan Preece did say it sounded like it was a step in the right direction when it came to the racing, but he also feels like we should have a softer tire in this car, but he also does praise Goodyear as well for Goodyear for stepping up to the plate over the years and trying to make the racing better with this next-gen car with the tire. Ryan Blaney said while it wasn't perfect, it was definitely a big step in the right direction, and he could definitely feel it and definitely tell that basically it was a lot easier to pass, and he could follow cars a lot more and could run guys back down once he got passed by them, saying, "I'll catch you in 20 laps," and sure enough, he was able to pass those guys in 20-25 laps. So Ryan Blaney seemed to be very happy about it. The general consensus from the drivers after the race is while it wasn't as big the hype was from some of the drivers like Hamlin and Briscoe and those guys, where they were expecting 4 seconds of tire fall off. There's definitely tire fall off in the race for sure. There was at least 2 to 2.5 seconds of tire fall off, so still quite a bit of tire fall off, but for Darlington, a little more than normal. But I will agree with what they said. There were a lot of people, especially on social media, who didn't think this race is great. Do I think this race is spectacular? No. But I think it was definitely a step in the right direction for Darlington. I noticed it today too. You could pass easier at Darlington. Darlington historically is a track that has been very tough and very, very difficult to pass. But it's been so much more difficult with the next-gen car. But I do think right now at this point, the racing has improved and gotten better at these types of tracks. And I think we've been seeing improvement. Look at Phoenix as an example. Phoenix probably had their best next-gen race they've had since we got there, but also racing's gotten better at Phoenix. I think about some tracks coming up that I'm excited for. We got Martinsville this week, and I think we could be in for a really fun race at Martinsville. I look for a lot of the guys that are really strong at Darlington to also be really good at Martinsville, maybe outside of Tyler Reddick, who's been very inconsistent and very hit or miss at a track like Martinsville over the years. But I really do agree with a lot of these drivers. It definitely felt more like an old school Darlington race, and it was fun. I know some people did not like the racing today, and I get it, but I think to me it felt more pure, it felt more exciting, felt more intriguing, and I thought it was definitely a fun race. I think we need to run this package everywhere because I think the racing will be fun at a lot of different tracks. Again, Darlington is a very tough track to pass, but again, I've had a lot of fun, and it was definitely a really good race to watch overall, in my opinion. Again, some will disagree. That's entirely fine. It's up to your interpretation, but I had a lot of fun and really enjoyed the NASCAR Cup Series race at Darlington earlier today that we saw for Cup. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Darrell Waltrip. Now, Darrell Waltrip was at the NASCAR Cup Series race at Darlington Raceway as part of the alumni group. Now, he got the chance and opportunity to go in the Fox Sports booth, actually hung around 40 to 45 laps, and he actually was able to get the opportunity to say, boogity, 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 let's go racing, boys. His most important catchphrase he's had over the years when it comes to opening up races when he was in the booth from 2001 to 2019. It felt really awesome to see him get the opportunity to do that. But during his interviews with multiple people from the Alumni Hall and the media as well, he talked about the races and how the races are formatted at this point. He says he is not a big fan of how the races are run, but still watches every single week and watches from time to time. What I think Darrell Waltrip is referencing is the stages and basically breaking up the stages into yellows throughout. There's been a lot of talk about stages, right? And I think this is the next big thing outside of the former playoff conversation. This is going to be the next big thing that is going to be talked about is stages. Stages were added in 2017 during the playoff format from 2014 to 2025. And they added stages around that time because they were having a lot of crazy championship formats from 2014 for 2016. They added the stages to award points throughout the race. And I think there's some good things with stages. The biggest issue is the stage yellows. This is the thing for me that I think needs to go. I've been saying this for a bit, and I'm going to continue saying this every single time we have a chance. Stage cautions need to go at every type of track. There's a few reasons why stage yellows need to go. It ruins natural strategy. It ruins natural fuel mileage finishes as well. And I think we need natural strategy to come back into play once again. But the other big thing, the stage yellows are too long. They're lasting way too long, and they're taking up time. People talk about the length of these races. This race today was 3 hours and 4 minutes at Darlington. You take the stage yellows out, you have a 2 hour to 2 hour 45 minute race. A lot shorter than what we originally saw. I think if you get rid of stage yellows, that would make a lot of people happy. And I think certainly more people will actually be okay with having stages if the stage cautions were removed at this point. And I think that's what a lot of people want to see. There's been a lot of people in the industry against the stage yellows, and I'm against them too. So let's get rid of the stage yellows. We can keep the stages. I have no issue with drivers being awarded points. I think that's actually a really good thing that NASCAR's done. But I think stage cautions, without question, 100% need to go. I think that's the one thing that needs to happen to get the sport in a much better position. I really hope that's the direction they go. They certainly need to go this direction. I truly believe the stage cautions do need to remove from races at every type of track, not just road course super speedways, at every type of track, because it will help the flow of racing get back in the right direction. I think that's truly the direction we need to go with the sport, in my honest opinion. Now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Carson Hocevar. Now, there has been a lot of talk about Carson Hocevar and been a lot of comparisons thrown around with Carson Hocevar, comparing him to Dale Sr. And Carson Hocevar sounds like, speaking to Eric Giesep and others in the industry and the media a couple days ago on Friday, he sounds like he is not a major fan of those Dale Sr. comparisons and really has never cared about the Dale Sr. comparisons as well. And what he says, he is not a fan of the Dale Sr. comparisons and wants to focus on himself and how he races and stop getting compared to Dale Sr. at this point. I'm actually really happy here that Carson Hocevar is saying this. And I think him telling people to stop comparing him to Dale Sr., I think that's a very important thing. I never really understood and gotten the Dale Sr. comparisons to Carson Hocevar. Is Carson Hocevar really talented guy? Yes. Does he have a great personality like Dale Earnhardt had? Absolutely. But Carson Hocevar hasn't done something that Dale Earnhardt did. Dale Earnhardt won races at this point. Dale Earnhardt had 76 NASCAR Cup Series wins and 7 NASCAR Cup Series championships. Carson Hocevar, meanwhile, is still looking for his first career Cup Series win. While sure Carson Hocevar is younger at this point than when Dale Sr. was when he had a lot of success, Carson Hocevar is a driver that, while talented, he's not basically won a race at this point in Cup competition. He's only got like 5 or 6 truck wins at this point in his career. On top of that as well, Dale Sr. also basically was the most popular driver outside of Bill Elliott in his time, even though Dale Sr. was not liked by a lot of people either. Carson Hocevar is not the most popular guy. Chase Elliott is the most popular guy. And I'm not really here to make comparisons. I think we need to see Carson have a lot more success to start having comparisons to other drivers. I think we all can agree that Carson Hocevar, he is going to win a race in the NASCAR Cup Series. There's no denying it. Look how he did at Darlington as prime example. I guess people are also comparing him to because of his Chili sponsorship with the Dale Sr. throwback. But just because he has a throwback doesn't mean we have to compare the guy. But getting back to the point, Carson Hocevar, he's going to win races. He's a very talented driver. He's going to do great. But I think instead of just trying to compare him, let's just hope he can thrive and have a ton of success and do a really good job behind the wheel long term. Because I think he could be a guy who could be a Cup Series champion. He could thrive. If he just continues having success and putting it in the right position, he will get wins at this point. I think the question is, will he win first or will Ty Gibbs win first? I think that's a big question everyone's really wondering at this point. But I agree with Carson on the thing of the comparisons. Not a big fan of the comparisons. To me, they don't make sense, and I really don't understand the comparisons between Carson Hocevar and Dale Sr. at this point. I don't really get it. They never made sense to me overall. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Daniel Suarez. Now, one of the big things that was talked about after the NASCAR Cup Series race at Las Vegas Motor Speedway is a feud between Daniel Suarez and Ross Chastain and former Trackhouse Racing drivers. And this has been a big talking point throughout the week. Obviously, Daniel Suarez went up to confront Ross Chastain after stuff happened on the cooldown lap. Both of them had some comments that were made. Ross Chastain basically said that Daniel Suarez does not take accountability at this point and basically said that they have not gone along for a very, very long time. Daniel Suarez got the chance and opportunity to speak to the media a couple days ago, and he spoke on Ross Chastain at that particular point, saying that he and Ross also have not gone along for a very long time. He also says that instead of him taking accountability, he says Ross Chastain has not really ever taken accountability over the years when he's made a mistake, and he should put it the other way around and not him at himself, Daniel Suarez. Meanwhile, he also says he has nothing against Trackhouse Racing at this point and doesn't have any issues with the Trackhouse team and the Trackhouse drivers currently at the moment. Now, we'll say one thing in Daniel Suarez's corner to start the season. He's definitely been better than the other Trackhouse Racing drivers. Even Ross Chastain basically said the Spire cars are definitely faster than the Trackhouse Racing cars, and I think that is objectively true. But I think there's a lot of things that I can kind of say is a little bit BS on Suarez not being against other Trackhouse drivers. He says he'd like to actually write a book on how things ended at Trackhouse Racing. Erin Marks, the wife of Justin Marks, a co-owner of Trackhouse Racing, or the owner of Trackhouse Racing, basically said, she said, I basically am excited to hear what you have to say about the departure. Obviously, Daniel Suarez let go from Trackhouse Racing because of the fact that he wasn't performing very, very well. Which, to be fair, the Trackhouse team just doesn't look great at this point. But looking at Daniel Suarez, it seems like he does have a vendetta, and he has a chip on his shoulder against the Trackhouse team. Look how he's raced drivers like Connor. He wrecked Connor at COTA. He ran into SPG and got into a feud with him at that race. I guess he seems to forget about that. Then, of course, he had this situation but happened last week at Vegas. Well, to be fair, I think that's more on Ross than anything else, but he has had issues with the Trackhouse Racing drivers, and I think it's very evident and clear that he definitely was part of the issue there in that situation. You can't just keep running into the Trackhouse drivers because you're going to get accused at this point that you have something against them, and I think there's clear as day at this point that he probably does have some sort of issue against the Trackhouse drivers at this particular point. But I think that for Daniel Suarez, the main focus is make the chase. Shut the people up because he's proved me wrong in the start here and doing a really good job. I can't blame him though for probably being frustrated getting asked all the media questions. I can understand that. I get it's the media's job. They ask these guys these questions and get those questions out there for the people that are watching their stuff or whatever especially. But I don't agree with everything Daniel Suarez here. I do think that it's true that Ross sometimes doesn't take accountability. But you can't brush it off because look how you've done things, Daniel. You criticized JGR when you left them. You criticized SHR when you left them. You've criticized Trackhouse multiple different times. You probably became an afterthought because you weren't performing very well. And Trackhouse was doing better at the time that you were on the team at that point. Coincidence? I think not. So I get some of the things Suarez is saying. I get the frustration at some points. But for Suarez, I think that some of the things he said is true. Also don't agree with everything that Daniel Suarez said here to the media. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Corey LaJoie. As it was announced on Friday for the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race took place at Darlington, that Corey LaJoie is back with Kaulig Racing in a couple weeks at Rockingham Speedway. He will drive the number 25 for Kaulig Racing at Rockingham Speedway. Now, unfortunately, Fox Sports decided in their infinite wisdom during qualifying, Jamie Little decided to basically put it out there that Corey LaJoie would be the driver of the number 25. And I gotta say, these broadcasters probably need to stop leaking that information, but that's neither here nor there. Anyways, getting back to the point, this will be the second straight time we have seen Corey LaJoie behind the wheel of the number 25 truck in a row. First time we'll see this for that number 25 truck. Do not get me wrong. Corey LaJoie, I don't think is a bad driver. There's a lot of people who do criticize Corey LaJoie. Corey LaJoie is an alright driver. A lot of the nights he fair at Darlington, he was the best of the Kaulig trucks. Ran around 10th to 15th a lot of the event, especially with how bad Kaulig was for the most part in the race. He actually did an alright and pretty good job behind the wheel. And I think he's an alright driver and not a bad driver, especially with the experience he has. My biggest gripe I have with the 25 truck, if I'm not mistaken, the original plan is that there was going to be a different driver behind the wheel of that truck every single week. I thought that was the initial plan. So now we're all of a sudden changing up the plans and putting the same guy in 2 weeks in a row instead of putting him in the other truck. I mean, you have the 10 truck available for crying out loud. That 10 truck, we'll get to that in a second, but that 10 truck is not a free agent truck. The 25 truck is. We started this program off on a really strong note. We, of course, had Tony Stewart open up the season. Then, of course, we had Ty Dillon. Maybe not an all-star, but he's not a terrible super speedway racer. Then you had Colin Brown. I'm like, okay, this is exciting. And people won't call him an all-star. Guys, a truck series win. Also, guys won the 24 Hours of Daytona and some other big events as well. I would consider Colin Brown an all-star. Then you get Corey LaJoie behind it. It's like, okay, he's not the biggest all-star, but he's an all-right driver. Now you're doing it 2 weeks in a row. I do have a theory, though, maybe the 10 truck might become the all-star truck because we don't know when Daniel Dye is going to come back. Reminder, Daniel Dye is currently suspended at this point. I imagine if we're going to get any big-time all-stars in the 10 truck, that might be the possibility. I mean, there still is a chance we could see Casey Kane. We could see potentially other guys like Jay McMurray get behind the wheel. There's been rumors about Casey Kane. So maybe we see Casey Kane get the chance and opportunity to drive the 10. I mean, Casey Kane's had a lot of success with Dodge and Ram over the years. He won in the 2 truck many years ago in 2004 twice at Darlington and Homestead back-to-back races. Maybe we see Casey Kane, who's won a Rockingham in the truck series back in 2012. I think it makes a lot of sense for Casey Kane to get the opportunity. Maybe Cleetus McFarland press. We're going to talk about Cleetus in a second, but he, of course, got the chance and opportunity to test recently. So maybe we see him behind the wheel. I just feel like Kaulig Racing, while I understand what they're trying to do here, maybe, I don't know, because AJ Allmendinger sounds like will also be behind the wheel. I don't know at this point, just some frustrations to me on how the Kaulig program is working at this time. And I'm glad that Corey's getting an opportunity. I think he's not a bad driver like some claim he is, but I think the way they're doing stuff when it comes to this program is a little frustrating, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next major story in today's episode as we're talking about Cleetus McFarland. Now, I did a video covering a story on the channel on Friday. As on Thursday, Cleetus McFarland got the chance and opportunity to test at Rockingham Speedway with Richard Childress Racing. The reason that Cleetus McFarland was testing at Rockham is because that is going to be where he will make his NASCAR LA Auto Parts Series debut in about a week and a half to 2 weeks from now. My event is actually next week will be the race at Rockham. There's a lot of anticipation, a lot of hype around Cleetus McFarland racing in that event at Rockham. Now, he got the chance and opportunity, as he explained in the video, in the 1 hour video he did. He said he got a full day of testing with the organization. Danny Stockman was there. Multiple other people, like multiple RCR engineers, were there as well. And even other individuals were there at the test, like Squirrel McNutt, who's a really good friend of Cleetus McFarland, who also racing in the ARCA East race, I believe, this week in a Hickory, as a matter of fact, making his debut. According to them, he ran 6 to 7 sets of tires during the test session and ran about 300 laps altogether. And basically, during that test, on one of the later runs, he had a big save off turn number 3, where he got sideways. Now, unlike the Truck Series test, where he got in the outside wall, as you found out he only did about 50 to 60 laps of testing at Rocking for the Truck Series race, he actually got no damage on the car and saved it. Now, looking at times that Cleetus McFarland did run at the test, he basically ran about 23.5s, 23.6s. That would have put him around 25th or 35th to 36th on the qualifying side of things. His race pace, actually, especially on the long run, was pretty good, closer to the drivers up front. But his qualifying speed, which I think he had a qualifying trim for what was said, he basically had around 30th to 35th place and didn't have the best time out there. I think people need to have their expectations very realistic at this point. I think we all can agree. We want to see Cleetus McFarland do a really good job. And I think especially now having the extra experience to having over 300 laps on the track, he should be able to do a much better job behind the wheel. There's been questions also about the fact that why the team got the chance and opportunity to test at Rockham. I guess that's probably the only track they could run at that has similarities to Rockham because it's its own thing at this point. That's probably the reason why they got the chance and opportunity to test there. But for the full save thing especially, save was really impressive. I think the expectations of Cleetus was a couple big things. Number one, don't become part of the story like you were at Daytona where you spun out on lap 6 of the race. That's one of the big things. Number two, improve throughout the race. Don't put yourself in the story. Don't affect the outcome of the race. Don't take out your teammates at Jess Love and Austin Hill. That's something you don't want to do. Because if Cleetus just keeps his nose clean and doesn't do anything wrong, he is going to get approved to run the race at Dega. I can't remember if it's the summer race that's going to happen or spring race, I should say, or if it's going to be the fall race. But he's also got Daytona on the schedule if he can basically run that. And of course, he's then going to run another year in 2027 likely with RCR. Again, the test went solidly from what a lot of people said, and I'm glad he got the chance and opportunity. Again, I think when it comes to testing, there's some being critical of this. I actually think more testing for drivers is needed because on-track experience is definitely needed for guys like Cleetus. I think that this is a huge win day for him to get a lot of testing because now Cleetus McFarland, there's not as many concerns to me with him doing it. His times were not awful, but again, I'm not expecting him to win. I'm certainly not expecting him to contend for top 10 or top 15 at this point. But I think for him, it's just getting that on-track experience and just doing the best he can. Let's have realistic expectations, though. Let's not expect Cleetus to be one of the favorites to go out there and pick up the win. Let's just see if he can do a really good job behind the wheel. Again, I think the testing, though, needed to happen for Cleetus. I think he'll do all right. I don't think he's going to cause too many issues. He's also getting an extra hour of practice because the O'Reilly Series will have the weekend down there and be the big series during that week, even though the ARC East race is going on, which I imagine Cleetus might try to run that race so he can get some more experience with Rhett Jones. Nonetheless, for Cleetus, good to see him get the on-track activity. It'll help him be more prepared and get him ready to go for the event. We'll see how he does at the race because now he's got more experience, and I think that's really important for a guy like him who needs to get that on-track experience. He's now got it. Hopefully he can do a really good job behind the wheel in the race. And now we're going to head on to the first of two major stories in today's episode as we are talking about Denny Hamlin. Now, there's been a lot of talk over the years about how much longer Denny Hamlin is going to race in the NASCAR Cup Series. And there's been a lot of rumors, especially since the end of last year when he signed the extension back in 2025, that 2027 seems to be the target year where Denny Hamlin could be in his final year in the NASCAR Cup Series. But it seems like he might be pushing back slightly a little bit on saying it's 100% definitely. But he does say that next year could be his last year. But he says you never know. He has informed, and he's been informed by Joe Gibbs Racing, that they're working on the future plans at this point for the 11 car and the 11 team at this time. And he's already trying to help the team get ready for those potential moves, especially with a potential succession plan, which we'll get to here in just a little bit. He says you never know at this point if this is going to be it. He could run more races in the future, and you never know, could lead to him making some starts with his own team, with 2311 Racing. Some have basically said Denny Hamlin may stay around longer, and I think 2028 is certainly a possibility as well, that he could stick around in the 2028 year. Denny Hamlin is one of those drivers that usually when you get up to where Denny Hamlin's age is, which will be 46 at the end of the year, Denny Hamlin and people around his age don't seem to always perform at the top of their game. But Denny Hamlin's like the exception. He's kind of like Kevin Harvick was around 2020, around 45 to 46, where Harvick was still performing very good and got wins in his second to last year in Cup. I think about Mark Martin in 2009, where at 50 years old, he had a 5-win season or 6-win season and nearly won the championship that year. Or Harry Gant in the 80s and 90s, where all of his wins came after the age of 40. Denny Hamlin is getting better, and is getting better as time goes on, and doing it with Chris Gale, not doing it with Chris Gabar at this point when it comes to the crew chiefing side of things. But I do think if Hamlin, and there's been a lot of talk that Hamlin could retire at the end of next year if he wins the championship. I think if Hamlin does win the championship this year, I do think there's a good chance and possibly that 2026 could be his last year. But I think Hamlin's also kind of set a goal. Denny Hamlin's big goal is he gets around 70 Cup Series wins. Judging by how he's done, I mean, last year he had a 6-win season. I think Denny Hamlin could win a lot of races. He's really good at Martinsville, and I think his goal is to get that 70-win total. If he was to get to 70 wins, he would right now be one of only 9 drivers in Cup Series history to reach that 70-win total, which is going to be very tough for any current Cup Series driver to go out there and do. It's been tough for Larson to win races, and Logano and guys like Keselowski are probably not that far away. Well, Keselowski's probably in the second half of his career, but he probably will win more races, but Larson's not been winning as much as of recently. But going back to Hamlin, I do still think it's very likely that next year is going to be Hamlin's last year. It just makes too much sense at this point. Hamlin's going to be 47 at the end of 2027, and I think that Hamlin will probably make that decision. Plus, we're not sure what's going to happen to the shoulder and other things. I think that's a big factor to look at as well, is his health at that point, because the health could become more of a big issue. It was kind of a big issue in 2023 when he's having the shoulder problems, or 2024 when he's having those issues, and I'm worried that that could be something to watch for on that front. Now, let's say Denny Hamlin retires at the end of 2027. Who could be his potential replacement? A lot of people think it could be a young driver by the name of Brent Cruz. Brent Cruz is very highly touted in the Toyota stable. And Brent Cruz is a guy who is actually going to be back full-time in the O'Reilly Series for the remainder of this year. And while he's not won a race at this point in O'Reilly and won a race in trucks, there's a lot of hype around him. And many people think he could be the response to Connor Zilisch, where he could win a lot of races. And there's a lot of people in the industry that are very, very high on Brent Cruz. I think there's a really good chance Brent Cruz will be that replacement driver. It obviously won't be Corey Heim, who I think will be in a 2011 race car most likely next year. We'll get to back here in just a short little bit. When I look at Denny Hamlin, if next year truly is the last year, he deserves to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. He, in my opinion, is the best driver to never win a championship, unless, of course, he wins a championship, which will then be a top 10 guy. I know there's people that have kind of said that Tony Stewart's a better all-time driver. I'm not sure at this point if that's entirely accurate, because Tony Stewart had a few bad years. In the last couple years of his career, he kind of fell off and had less of a longevity compared to Denny Hamlin. Sure, Tony got 3 championships and won different formats, but championships always don't equate everything. Look at the past championships in the past that people don't like, and Hamlin would have been a champion probably under a more chase format or something like that. But going back to Hamlin, he's one of the best ever raced. But then you look at Toyota, another side of things. You got other things that can happen with Toyota, but I think they're working on a succession plan. If we see Brent Cruz go full-time Cup, though, in 2028, I think that would be really, really huge for him. I think he's got the talent to back it up for sure, and I think he's a really talented guy who's shown a lot of great things over the years as certainly a young driver. So I do think it's very likely that next year is Denny Hamlin's final year, but anything's possible. 2028 is also still a possibility if Hamlin's performing atop his game. You never know. I don't think 76 or 80 wins is possible for Hamlin, but 70's on the top of his game, getting 9 or 10 wins, maybe something he could do. I think Hamlin could potentially retire end of next year. We'll see if that does, in fact, end up happening at the end of 2026 or 27 if Hamlin retires at the end of next year. And now we're going to jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Corey Heim. Now, obviously, there's been a lot of talk and conversations in this silly season about the future of Corey Heim and NASCAR Cup competition. Many people, including myself, do feel like that Corey Heim deserves to be full-time in the NASCAR Cup Series at this point. And many people feel like it's outrageous that Corey Heim, and kind of just ridiculous, he is not full-time racing any series at this point. Because he's doing a part-time schedule with 2311, running 12 races this year. And then, of course, he's running part-time with Tricon Garage, where he just picked up the win at Darlington. But there continue to be a lot of questions about what the future for Corey Heim is for 2027. Well, according to Bob Pockers, he says that Corey Heim basically took a gamble on himself being part of 2311 Racing. And the indications are is that more than likely Corey Heim will be racing for 2311 Racing, most likely full-time, in 2027 and take over the third 2311 Racing car and take over the 35 car going into the 2027 year. I do believe that Corey Heim should already be in that 35 car. Now, look, I know Riley Herbst, he had a really good run at Darlington and was likely going to get a top 10 or top 15 finish, which is a run he really, really needed. But let's be real and honest. Corey Heim is a way more talented driver than Riley Herbst is currently at the moment. I guarantee you that if Corey Heim was right on in that 35, he'd have multiple top 10s, and while probably not winning a race at this point, he would certainly be way closer, probably closer to having top 5s and top 10s more consistently than Riley Herbst has done. And I think he should have already been full-time this year in that car, because I think especially after dominating the Truck Series, winning 12 races last year, he should without question be full-time at this point. But again, it comes down to the almighty dollar. Luckily, he's got other things. He, of course, has Robinhood as a sponsorship, which sponsorship is going to be a big factor. He's also been looking to pick up some big sponsors going into the year as well, or going next year, which, again, Monster Energy might be leaving if Riley Herbst ends up leaving. But I think he should be full-time in Cup. Now, let's say he does go full-time Cup racing next year. How much success would he have? I don't know if he win a race as a rookie. It's very difficult for young drivers to win races as rookies. We've seen that with Carson Hocevar up to this point. We've seen that with Connor Zilisch the first few races of this year. Has not won a race in any of NASCAR's divisions at this point. And we've all seen other drivers like Noah Gragson struggle. Ty Gibbs hasn't won. So I'm not sure if Corey Heim would win. But do I think Corey Heim would be a top 10 threat every week? Absolutely. I think with the speed that 25 Racing's been showing to start this year, I think that will continue going next year with the lawsuit not happening, plus Michael Jordan putting a lot more money into the team and helping with the program in a big way. I think that he would absolutely do a really good job, and I think he's ready to be full-time Cup. I think he's one of the few guys right now that is for sure ready to be Cup. I think the only other one, in my opinion, is probably ready to go Cup racing is Jesse Love at this point. Everyone else needs more experience, and I think are not ready. Though some of those guys in the lower series outside of these two could be Cup drivers like Carson Hocevar, who's been rumored to be part of the Penske stuff. But let's say if Corey Heim does go full-time Cup racing in 2027 and takes over the third 2011 Racing car, what happens to Riley Herbst? Because Riley Herbst seems to be the odd man out currently at the moment for that team. There is a lot of talk and chatter in the industry that he could go to Legacy Motor Club. Legacy Motor Club is expected to have a third full-time car in the Cup Series in 2026. And his name has been brought up and mentioned multiple different times for that third car. There's a couple reasons why that move would make a lot of sense. One, he brings sponsorship and funding. They're going to need someone with sponsorship funding paying around $45 to $50 or whatever the charter was. I think it was $45 million for the charter. They're going to need someone to bring funding to basically offset the cost. I get you've got some of the other groups that are over there helping out, like some of the sports funding over there. But I think especially the guys who own Herbst do that. But I think you need someone to bring sponsorship and funding with him, and Riley Herbst does. Second thing, the family connection. Troy Herbst was teammates with Jimmy Johnson in the Mint 400 recently, and that was the car that Jimmy drove was owned by the Herbst family. That would make a lot of sense at this point. We could potentially see a lineup next year of Erik Jones, John Hunter Nemechek, and of course Riley Herbst. But let's not forget, Erik Jones and John Hunter Nemechek are both not signed past 2026. Now, granted, I think it's very likely that both Jones and Nemechek are going to return to Legacy. I don't see how Erik Jones is going to be let go. I know Erik Jones has been kind of hit or miss at points, though I will say he's had 2 top 10 finishes the last 2 races this year. So I think people denying Jones, saying he shouldn't be in the car, I disagree. And John Hunter, I know he's behind Jones in opponents, but I think Nemechek has had some good runs the last couple years, especially with Legacy. And I think them expanding, you'll have to look at that. So I think Herbst is likely there. Now, there's obviously been talk about Jesse Love, too. Jesse Love's name's been linked to teams like Penske from what some have been saying recently. And there's even other teams that could potentially be landing spots. I mean, Cinder loses the seat in the 2 car. Maybe that is where he goes, or goes to the RCR car if Kyle Busch doesn't return. Kyle Busch could also end up in a Legacy car, but a lot of indications are that if Kyle Busch doesn't return to RCR next year, he probably goes to Spire and takes over to 7 or 71, though I will say Suarez is already earning his right to keep that seat at this point, how well he's been running, especially if he makes the chase this year. He probably should keep that seat for another year. Question is McDowell. There's been a lot of talk about McDowell's future. I could absolutely see McDowell retiring at the end of the year, and this could be a landing spot for Kyle Busch, too. The 48's always a big question. I think Bowman deserves to keep the C. And then Tyler Reddick, of course, I'm going to keep mentioning this, does not have a contract past 2026 at this point. He should, without question, be back next year, and he's probably waiting to announce it at this point. But 4 wins, God almighty, sign the extension in 2012 and get it done at this point. So we're stop speculating on him. And then, of course, you also have Ryan Blaney. There's been some rumors recently that Ryan Blaney could be a free agent at the end of the year. I don't think, unless the 48 car becomes available, I don't see how he leaves Penske. I know he's in a contract year, but I think that he should stay with Penske. There's other guys that are in contract years. Josh Berry's in one from what I understand. There could be some shuffling going on with that 21. Noah Grayson's not signed past this year. He's a big question mark. And, of course, other drivers are also big question marks. Cole Custer's an unknown. Stenhouse is an unknown at this point. Bubba Wallace doesn't have a contract past this year from what I understand with 23-11. So there's a lot that could happen. But going back to Heim, I think there's a great chance to be full-time in Cup with 24 Racing in 2027 at this point. I just think it's very likely. So that's for today's Law NASCAR news and motorsports news episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Let's go to below that and comment your thoughts below on today's video. You think Corey Hamlin will be full-time in Cup competition next year? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about Hamlin's future? You think he'll retire at the end of next season? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If there's any major news or breaks later today, we'll discuss it live on the channel. Tomorrow on the channel, we are going to have an updated look at the standings for the Cup Series at this time for after the 6th week of the year. And also, we'll maybe have another video if any news breaks. Wednesday should have a NASCAR news video dropping on the channel. And we also are going to have the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series race fix for Martinsville. Then on Thursday, Cup race fix for Martinsville. And we'll have the race review as well. Then on Friday, we'll probably have a news video dropping. Not going to have reaction to modified race. And then, of course, Saturday and Sunday, we're going to have reactions to the Cup and O'Reilly Auto Parts Series race from Martinsville. And other news videos will be coming throughout the week. Got a lot of content coming on people like Haley Deegan, Shaman Gisberg, and Carl Arts, Kurt Busch, Kyle Busch, Paul Wallace, Ross Chastain, Shelby Chris, Sam Mayer, Frankie Muniz, Cleetus McFarland, Dodge Ram, Tony Stewart, Casey Kane, Tony Breidinger, Greg Biffle, Brad Keselowski, Connor Zilisch, Motorsports, Daniel Suarez, Ryan Priest, all the good stuff. Corey LaJoie, Nick Sanchez, Corey Heim. We'll talk about a lot of stuff on the channel in the coming days, weeks. We're on Red Bull 2 and all that, and Daniel died too. So anyways, like I said, one thing I was watching today's episode. I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content, other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.